This is Remote Ruby.
Have you any remote idea to the meaning of the word?
How was last week's episode? Oh, wow.
That was a week ago.
I mean, we kind of killed it, to be honest.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
you missed out.
No, don't listen to it because I said something very pessimistic about something. Just, you're better
go
off.
ahead. Go ahead.
You're my friend. I don't like seeing you in pain. I've had several friends, parents who I grew up with who had issues with their knee. And I'm just like, I hope Jason doesn't have to deal with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like a weird, like...
This is me caring about you.
Yeah, it's like a weird...
You're very
like,
confused by that.
loving pessimism. And I don't...
Well, it's more like, I hope he doesn't struggle with this for the rest of his life.
So really, are you trying to be optimistic?
Well, I'm very naturally pessimistic. I'm saying, I hope that this is the last issue you ever have with your knee. That is what I hope. That's the energy I'm putting out into the world today.
The doctor told me today that it is very uncommon, the injury I had. So that made me feel like if I'm going to do it, at least I did it like my way. Falling on concrete stairs.
Yeah. Surprised you didn't break something in that hotel in LA.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we talked about it on the show. Chris, you weren't here. I fell in the shower the last day at Rails SaaS. Nadia's with us today. Did you stay at the Dream?
Dream. Yes.
So the showers were like real long. At least mine was. It was like, so I was like walking out. I was like, yeah. And I slipped and I hit the edge of the shower and like there was a metal rod on the bottom. It was awful. I was like limping through the airport the rest of the day.
And it was a big bruise. I was dude, you are lucky it wasn't worse.
Maybe I was a little too intimate to share that with you, Andrew, but I thought you had to know.
I was a lifeguard. I was like first aid, AED. I taught lifeguard class, taught first aid classes. So whenever you said that, I'm immediately like, oh my God, well, if he slips in the shower, this can happen. And like, if you're not near your phone and you're immobilized, I mean, thankfully we were in a hotel, but I'm doing like, what's next? Like, what do we need to do like to help this person? Yeah.
And you're like, I hope he doesn't end up like all my friends' parents who fell in the shower.
Right. Yeah. That's my hope. Cool. We've gotten off to a great start. So happy.
So was all the episode was last week? Just you talking about?
No. Chris had a topic that we talked about for the majority of it for upgrades to GoRails and pay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we talked about data migrations and whether you run rake tasks or...
Or
you just manually edit in your SQL GUI.
Good thing I was not here.
Edited the file on the server in Nano. And if you didn't know this, you can run bin Rails restart to restart your application. So I edited the file on the server and restarted the app. And you know what? It just worked.
Hot fixes to the rescue.
Literally hot and ready, like the donuts.
That sounds like an episode of Mr. Robot.
I love
that. Did you ever
show.
watch that show? It was so good.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember how it ended though. But I was thinking like that show's so good. And then I thought, I don't remember how it ended at all. And I tried to look it up and it was just an analysis of the ending. It didn't actually help me remember the ending. So
I'll tell you.
Very helpful. Okay. All right. Well, glad to be back. Glad y'all had a good time talking about data and the sins Andrew has committed in production. So speaking of Rails SaaS, when we were there, we saw... It wasn't titled a keynote, but it started the conference. So we're going to call it a keynote because it was definitely keynote quality.
Oh, yeah. Better than most, honestly.
I do not actually have the title in front of me. So.
I remember most of it. Hold on. It's one woman dev team was like our tagline, right?
Yeah.
Getting some. Yeah.
You know what? Don't edit this out. Let's just go. Nadia, do you mind just giving yourself a quick introduction, telling us a little bit about you, and then we will just unpack all of this.
So Nadia Odunayo, I am the founder, CEO, and software developer of The StoryGraph, which is a book tracking and recommendations app. It's known as an alternative to Goodreads. And the title of my talk at Rails SaaS was Getting to 1 Million Users as a One-Woman Dev Team. And thank you for all the lovely stuff you said about my talk. It really warmed my heart. And I listened to the episode as well, your Rails SaaS episode. And yeah, it was just very touching.
It's been a while since like I was forced to sit in a room, listen, and was like, oh my God, like I'm getting excited. Like what happened next? You know, like you are an excellent storyteller. If no one's ever told you that, you are great at that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot because I spend a lot of time on my talks in general. And this was my first talk back since the pandemic. And because my work is now so busy, the talk was ready. I was up until 5 a.m. in the morning of the talk doing final touches. And the first draft that I did, I remember I gave it to my friend Saron, who also spoke. And she was like, I don't think it's good enough. I know the story because you were my friend and you were telling me as I was living it beside you. And I don't feel like you've got the impact. So I had to completely restructure it. I had to completely redo the slides. And I was very stressed about the whole thing. So to hear this feedback about you being like gripped to the story, that means a lot because it means that I got to where I wanted to be with the talk.
I think part of it was when you were explaining what it was, you had talked about Goodreads, which is an application that many people are familiar with for storing books and stuff, I guess. I found it not long ago and I was like, wait, are they shutting down? They're revoking API tokens. Like I can't do the things I want to do, like this UI, like, and I was like, I'm going to replace Goodreads. And I was like, yes, let's do it.
Yeah, I used Goodreads since 2012. And there was a period of my life where it was my favorite app. And probably about 3 or 4 years into using Goodreads, I had a thought of, wait, it hasn't changed at all since I've been using it, especially when you're a technical person. I did a software bootcamp after university. I feel like you notice software changes more. And I realized that this app that I use all the time just hadn't changed since 2012. And I wasn't angry about it like I know some people are, but I was just more surprised, especially because Amazon owned it and they have a lot of resources. And when I started StoryGraph, it wasn't like, as I say in the talk, I wasn't trying to build an alternative to Goodreads, but because of the fact that I think the product has been so stagnant for so long, it was just natural that a lot of people who used it had pain points with using it. And if I was going to satisfy those pain points, I end up with a product that's an alternative to it.
It was one of the most engaging talks. It had a good flow. Like the person I think of when I think of storytellers as well is like Nick Means.
I love him.
Yeah, exactly. He's like,
he's a friend. He's a friend. He's a good friend.
Yeah. And so like, I was thinking like, this has that like sharp, good turns. Like it was great. So you kind of mentioned a little bit, you said you hit a boot camp out of college. How did you get into programming? Was the boot camp your first experience with programming?
No, I had an experience just before that. So to go back a tiny bit, I studied philosophy, politics, and economics. Economics was my favorite subject. I focused in on that. It was kind of instilled in me from my parents who wanted good futures for their children that I was kind of going down the investment banking route. And so since the age of about 12, 13, I was staying in the industry, doing all the little summer, spring programs, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until I did the internship between my second and third year of university that I became disillusioned with the whole thing. And I was like, is this it? Is this what I'm like working so hard for? There must be more to life than this. And so I ended up trying to find alternatives for what I was going to do after graduation. I knew that I'd always been kind of entrepreneurial. And so I had applied for this entrepreneurship program. I wasn't technical at this point. And there was a checkbox on the form that said, we might be piloting a coding course for women. Would you want to be considered for that too? And I just thought, well, it can't hurt to check this box. I'm not really interested in coding. It can't hurt to check this box. So I checked the box. And I'll never forget the phone call that I received. I got through to the final round of this entrepreneurship program. And one of the people who ran it gave me a call and she said, I've got good news and bad news. And I just immediately knew what was going to happen. I said, what's the bad news? And she said, you haven't made it into the program. So I was like, what's the good news? She said, you're going to have a place on Code First Girls, this new coding course. And I remember being like, what do I want with a coding course? And I just put the phone down, really disappointed. And then the next day, so I was at Oxford, and the next day, my college messaged me about working for a couple of months during the summer after graduating. And the great thing is about how this all worked out is they almost didn't send me that message because they said, oh, Nadia would be perfect for this role, but I'm sure she's got a job lined up. Doesn't she have an investment banking job lined up? But let's just send the email anyway because she's our first preferred person to do it. And when I received this email, like the day after I got that call, it just clicked. I was like, I'm going to turn down the banking job. I'm going to stay in Oxford. I'm going to work on this. They were building a website that was essentially for 12 to 16-year-olds to get them to start thinking early about the kind of subjects they wanted to study so that they were in the best place to apply to top universities in the UK or around the world. And then I will travel twice a week to London to do this coding course. That was my first experience of coding. And the reason why I was kind of inclined to do the coding course is during university, I ran an online writing publication and I had no technical skills, and we had a website and we had a friend who was kind of helping us do it. And I remember I had to wait on when he was free to help. I paid him some money initially, but then it was kind of just helping as a friend. And so he had paying clients. And so I remember feeling like I couldn't act when I wanted to and I had to kind of wait. So I was kind of inclined to be like, if I was technical, then I could have done this myself. Yeah, so I did that coding course. And then while I was doing that coding course on Twitter, I saw a tweet about a free place to this coding bootcamp. It was normally £8,000, but there was a competition for a free place. And I entered the competition and I won. And honestly, if I didn't win that competition, I don't know what path I would have gone down, because I was definitely not at the point where I would have paid £8,000 to go to a coding bootcamp. Because even when I won the competition, I still called up people who'd done the course and said, is it worth it? I don't really want to be a developer. Being a developer is not for me, but maybe it'll be good because I'm going to be an entrepreneur and then I can talk to developers. Like I just had this really stereotypical thing in my mind of what a developer was. And so, yeah, it's so good I won that competition because it's just changed my life.
That's a cool story. There's a lot of turns to get there. I love that. So at the boot camp, is this where you first experienced Ruby, or are there other languages involved? What's that like?
Yeah, so both at the Code First Girls program that I did, and then the boot camp, that was mainly Ruby and Rails focused. So that was my first experience. And I just loved all the things that we tend to love about Ruby. The fact that it was very readable and accessible. I really liked that. That was great. My first job was at Pivotal. And I remember at one point, the team I was working on, we were transitioning the product that we were working on from Ruby to Go. And I remember just having my mind blown at how much Ruby abstracted away, how much I just didn't have to worry about error handling or garbage collection. It was a really interesting experience, transitioning an app from Ruby to Go.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like an experience. I'm also interested. So it sounds like pretty early on, you were already thinking entrepreneurially, starting a business. And then it just so happens now that you're both an entrepreneur and a developer. What was that journey like from maybe going from Pivotal to today where you have the StoryGraph?
Well, I'd already been doing the part-time course in London. And then when I got into the bootcamp and I was doing a lot more, I realized how powerful having technical skills was. And I thought to myself, I'm quite entrepreneurial. I probably want to start my own thing eventually, but 90% of startups fail. So at least if I can code, there'll be someone that will pay me to build a website or an app for them. That was my thinking. And so I decided to really focus in on the coding. And the other thing I realized was it was during the bootcamp where I stopped saying I want to be an entrepreneur, because that was just an empty statement. What did that mean? I didn't have a big idea or an idea. And so I felt like I kind of dropped that label that I was kind of carrying around. And I just said, look, I'm just going to focus on getting really good at coding, and I'm going to get a job and see when a big idea strikes me. And in the meantime, I'm going to focus on developing my skills. So I got a job at Pivotal, worked there for 1.5 years, and ended up quitting with a colleague to start a product/consulting company. And we did that for about 1.5 years. And the reason I left was because we kind of got stuck in a lucrative consulting gig, and it was with a bank. And I remember being like, oh, I can totally see that we just do this for 10 years and make a lot of money. And then I end up the whole quitting, turning down the banking job, trying to go into tech. I just end up not really fulfilling any potential that I think I have. And also just, it wasn't the most fun either. And so I left that partnership. And because Theo and I, my business partner then, had been just saving up money so that we could eventually work on our own product, and I owned half the company, that's when I got half of that money that we've been saving up. And that's what gave me the runway to essentially invest in myself and eventually start StoryGraph. I spent 1 year in between leaving that first company and starting StoryGraph, working with Saron on Code Newbie. I was the CTO. Then that partnership and the product idea we had didn't work out either. And that's when I found myself in a position of, okay, I've had 2 failed partnerships that didn't work out. I've got 4 years of runway. I have side projects. I'm not going to put pressure on it. Let me just code away. And here we are.
I will say your talk had so many great stories, but a few times you said the words financial independence. And me seeing the audience, I was like, what is that? And then as you started talking, you're like, oh, and I had this amount of runway that I knew I could spend. And I'm like, I want to do that. And so there was a lot, not just the technical stuff, that I was like, wait, I can actually do this. I like that part of your story because I'm like, that helped me. Now I'm learning about that too. I'm like, wow, I didn't know I do this stuff. And I never was interested. I feel like you either naturally have great UX talent or you have someone really good on your team. Because when I was signing for StoryGraph, it was like a journey. And I'm wondering, like, you know, those decisions like on the UX and on that stuff gradually builds up. But I'm like, what do you kind of think about like journey you take when you build these kind of software apps?
For you to compliment the UX makes me very happy. But also I'm in the middle of a big redesign right now, which is like weeks delayed. And I'm like, I can't wait to get it out because it addresses a lot of the current UX pain points that our users have. But I'm not trained in design or UX. I think just from using a bunch of products and trying to keep things as simple and use like what I know has helped me so far. And I've also got support from like Saron has been a great person in terms of helping with the redesigns. I'm able to communicate my customer research to her and say, these are the pain points, and she can help me create new designs. I guess I just try and put myself in the shoes of the user and think, what are some good experiences I've had, and try and implement that as best as I can. And then this also makes me painfully aware of the shortcomings of our flow. And I'm always trying to find time to improve those as well. So we've gone through several iterations, and it's funny because each time we release a new design, like the one that you went through today is about a couple of years old now. And I remember when we launched it, I was so excited and so happy because it was a big improvement on what we had before. But now that's been live for 2 years, and I've seen the repeated questions that we have, or people don't know about the community preferences or whatever it is. Now I can't wait for it to be gone. And it's funny because I'm on the verge of this redesign, and now I keep seeing so many people on social media saying, oh, I love the UX. It's so easy to use. And I'm thinking, where were all of you people in the last year? No, we have a mix. We have a lot of people saying that it's easy to use and it's great, but we also do have repeated, it's so confusing. That is also fascinating too, like having people on the two ends. And I want to get to the point where it's just more on it's very intuitive and easy to use in general.
Right. I relate so much to your redesigning struggles. Or I hear exasperation. I've been redesigning one of the same things for multiple years, multiple iterations. I'll never be happy with it. It'll probably never ship. But
is it your website?
I don't want to talk about it, Jason. I just said that. I could hear the exasperation in your voice, and I'm like, oh, I relate to that. I know where that's coming from. It's like when I was signing up today, it's like, what do I do now? Because I didn't really use Goodreads, right? Like I just used Goodreads because that's what other people were using. I'm like, oh, well, I want to show people what I'm reading, even though I don't read that much. And they're like, okay, well, how about you import from Goodreads? And then how about you add something to your reading pile? And I'm like, oh, I can just click that. And it was like, I feel like I'm being guided. And now it's like teaching me almost what's in the app. And I haven't navigated anywhere. I really enjoy it. So if that's natural, you got talent.
Thank you. I want more of that. I think if you were to use the product for a bit longer, you would ask me questions that I would say that should have been in onboarding, or I could have guided Andrew there earlier in the product. I'm glad to hear that at least that first experience for you felt frictionless and felt easy. But with the new design, one of the things I'm excited about is just from the way that we're changing how the book pages look, you're going to see more of what features we have on offer. Because I'll repost or retweet certain things or reshare stories, and I'll have people reply and say, I didn't know I could do that. Amazing. I've been using the app for 2 years. And it's very painful because we have a lot of really advanced, like neat functionality, but people don't know. I mean, one such feature is you can put in the usernames of all of your friends or reading buddies, and we look at the books on your to-read pile and try and suggest what we think the best books for the group would be. That is a pay feature right now, but we're going to make it free. But even the paying users know it exists.
I'm going to use that for my Ruby book club that I haven't started.
Oh, fun.
I love it and also hate it. I know what you mean where you're like, I have all this really cool stuff, but only the power users of my app know about it. And I want everyone to know about it. Because that's like, when as soon as you said that, I'm like, that's awesome. I would love to like sync up with people in the community that I know. Like, let's read a book together. This could help us pick one. Like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
With the StoryGraph, I mean, not a big spoiler, written in Ruby. I linked to the actual talk you gave at Rails SaaS, which covers a lot of kind of the getting started of it. I'm curious to hear about how Ruby has been years later for you. Are you still happy with the decision to use Ruby?
I think I feel like I didn't decide to use Ruby. It was what was put in front of me. And I feel very lucky that is what I was made to learn, because there definitely have been periods, I think mainly when I was working at Pivotal around that time, where I was made to feel through, well, I guess no one made me feel this way, but through like seeing all the communication, all the social media chatter around Ruby is dead, Ruby is dying, and you need to learn these new JavaScript frameworks. I definitely had moments feeling like, oh, I probably eventually I'm going to do my own thing. Do I need to start learning something new now? And like even thinking about being at work and us rewriting the app in Go, or it was a platform as a service, Cloud Foundry in Go, made me wonder, is Ruby good for anything? What's Ruby good for? Is it only good for like toy app? And then I think it was knowing of other bigger companies and products that have been successful on Ruby and Rails. But also I think if I go back to when I started the product, it was kind of like, well, I know that Ruby Rails is great for prototyping. And there are people who have scaled Ruby Rails apps to certain scales, and I'm nowhere near that scale. So I might as well just start with what I know, get going fast, test. And then my thinking was, if I ever get to a real stopping point where it's like, I can't use Ruby Rails anymore, and I'm at the stage where it needs a rewrite, then sure. But so far, I mean, we still got a long way to go. Yeah, we scaled a lot. But so far, there's always a solution. There's always something that's had the same problems and solved it somehow. And so I love the internet. It's great.
Whether US East 1 is down or you forgot to add a configuration file, everyone has an outage from time to time. When your next outage occurs, transparency is critical. The difference between a minor annoyance that people soon forget and a fiasco that creates sustained resentment is in how you communicate. That's why you need Honeybadger. Honeybadger will be a crucial component of your incident response plan with their uptime monitoring service that now has an exciting new feature, public status pages. Create a new status page with custom domains, branding, and more. Don't let Twitter be the only way your users can find out if your app is down. Sign up for Honeybadger to improve your incident response with a shiny new status page that you will be proud to show your users. Visit honeybadger.io and start giving your users a better experience today, and let them know Remote Ruby sent you. Thanks to Honeybadger for their continued support of Remote Ruby.
I was pairing with someone the other day, and I was just like, I just kept hitting Google, and it wasn't weird for them.
Yep.
So you mentioned scaling. I feel like most of the time for me, when I've gotten better at scaling, it's been because of trial by fire. And so I'm kind of curious some of your experiences just scaling, because I mean, the whole talk was to 1 million users. So you obviously have people using the app. What are some of the maybe interesting things you'd want to share about scaling? I'm curious of your experience because you are the solo dev. Like, it's not like you're like, here's my team. So I want to point that out before you share too, for those listening.
So I am the solo web and app developer. My co-founder, Rob, is technical, but he's not web app developer. So he doesn't know Ruby. He doesn't know Rails. He is more back-end infrastructure, operations, database kind of realm. I mean, he's great in terms of asking me questions to help me think of different areas if I run out of ideas, but he's not coding. If I'm not coding, nothing's happening. Anyway, so in my up until StoryGraph, I would either be working on, even at Pivotal, it would either be a small, new startup comes in and we're literally building an app with 0 users, or I'd be in a bigger company, but then I'm in a bigger company. So I never had to worry about scaling issues personally. And then the first time we had to really deal with it was in the summer of 2020, when there were some really popular tweets about us. And suddenly we went from having tens of people using it any given time to having thousands any given time. So database scaling, that is the first thing that I've learned a lot about. I remember that we had this thing where the app was just running so slow and we tried so many different things. There were definitely some bits of code I needed to rewrite, but it was just not set up to deal with more than 5 people. But then after that, I couldn't understand what was going on. And I remember Andy Kroll, who I know you guys know, he texted me after he saw, because I have a newsletter, and every week I would be like, look at the Heroku graph. It's just not good. We'd fix it and then we just get those red, the response time graphs would just be red. And Andy just texted me one day and he was like, which Heroku database are you on? And I was like, the $50 one. It was a $50. Although whatever the cheapest paid one was. Because that's what I've been using, ever since I got past 1,000 rows or whatever it is. I've just been on that one. And he said, yeah, that's never going to work. You need to, especially with your Goodreads import, it's write heavy. You need to get better database or a bigger database. So upgraded to the $200 database. And originally it seemed like it was working. And we thought we'd solved it. Oh, we just needed to throw money at the problem. Great. But then after a bit of time, the response time would start going up again. You looked at everything. We were looking at the logs. And then one point, Rob noticed this thing called read IOPS. And he was like, what is this number? We didn't know what it was. It was just a number that we kept on seeing like fluctuate and go up and down. And we Googled it. And that's when we learned about database IOPS and basically how many read and writes can happen per minute or per second. And the other thing we found was a Heroku page on the technical specifications of each database. It's like a separate page. It's not like where you buy the database. And it tells you for each plan what the IOPS rate is, but also whether it has burstability or not. And what was happening was when we upgraded, our IOPS went up, and it was also the last burstable database. So the reason why it would seemingly work for a bit was because we were in the burst period, and then it would suddenly go bad because we exceeded how long we could burst for. And once we found that out, it changed everything, because now we understand what we're looking for. So we were like, okay, so we need to upgrade the database again. And so we don't have both, but we were able to say, okay, this is the rate at which writes are coming in at this usage. So we upgraded to a suitable plan and all our problems were gone. So that was like the first big things that we had to learn about database IOPS and being able to look at the right number and therefore choose a technical specification that matched the usage of the app. For weeks, we were on a $50 database that was never going to work. It just didn't cross my mind that, we need, obviously, with this many users, this database can't handle it. That was one of the scaling journeys. I remember Rob and I just trying to wrap our heads around what number of database connections combined with like Puma, like threads. I had so many notes of maths and like numbers of like, so 5 times 4 and how many web dynos. That was another stressful thing to figure out. And to this day, I still don't think I properly got it, but we managed to find a combination that worked. And then a more recent scaling issue, which we've dealt with, was Elasticsearch. And so sharding, like, again, that wasn't anything I didn't know. We had a lot of traffic at the beginning of 2022. We're like, the database is good. The threads are catching good. What now? I was looking at all the various dashboards we have, went into our Elasticsearch dashboard, saw that all the requests were read, didn't know like what to do. And then through research and whatever, I realized, we're at the point where we need to start sharding our Elasticsearch database. So those are some of the scaling challenges that we just kind of, and again, it's always, by the way, firefighting. It's always in a high stressful situation because a lot of people are trying to use the app and it's not working. Yeah, it's just been fun learning experiences.
I got goosebumps, and I think I had like actual trauma response, because when you're talking about watching that Heroku graph and all of a sudden it turns red and you're like, I've been trying to bring this thing down and why is it back? And then you said the connections thing for weeks. I had PG Bouncer configured with the wrong amount of connections, and that's what the problem was. Oh my God.
PG Bouncer issues as well. That was another thing. There was a time where we needed PG Bouncer. We didn't have it. And then there was a time where PG Bouncer caused this issue because it wasn't configured correctly.
Yep.
So yeah.
Oh my God.
And because of the delay of the Heroku graph, it's like you're waiting. Like the number of times I sat in this very seat and just been waiting for it to have crashed and be like, please don't go up. Just stay down. And then it's like, it's very painful.
It just happened to me again.
Sorry.
The late
I'm so sorry
nights.
to trigger you.
Oh my God.
I get like my PagerDuty when I hear the ringtone around, like out, it just freaks me out. I had a friend tell me off recently because she said, why was your alarm like a very common alarm tone that you're going to hear around? So I changed it now, but the old one still triggers me because it takes me back.
I'm curious about your Elasticsearch journey. I have used Elasticsearch. I have used it a lot, and it is so complicated. I feel like it's so complicated, way more than it needs to be. So I'm just kind of curious about what kind of Elasticsearch journeys have you had?
Well, the reason why we have Elasticsearch is because I was using PG Search for a long time. And I don't know, maybe there was a way to make it work. But for a long time, when we got to a certain level of usage, I couldn't optimize it enough to make it be fast. It was slow. I had friends work with me, take a look. help me out. And it just got to a point where I think I did a tweet about PG search. And I think I can't remember whether I asked for alternatives or whether I just expressed the problems I had. But I found a lot of people were like, just use Elasticsearch. And I didn't want to go down this route. Andrew, trust me, I like simplicity. It's just me. So I'm trying to keep everything simple. And to me, the idea of spinning up this separate thing that I needed to index and configure, I didn't want it. But it got to the point where I convinced myself that maybe I do need this. I'm at the scale where I need Elasticsearch now. So it was a journey just getting to the point of acceptance that I think I need to go for something that seems to be better at scale. And so then, got on Elasticsearch. It was the Heroku add-on at the time. And I would later found out years later, I didn't really do any configuration. At the time, I probably didn't need to, but I just did whatever basic defaults there were. And Elasticsearch docs, okay, I've gotten better, but they are, whoa. I'm like, just show me examples of how I meant to write this query. I still haven't got used to Kibana and figuring out how, like, I know just about how to click in and check that it's indexing properly and that it looks how I want it to look. But these search patterns, there's so much stuff that maybe if I'd known how to do it would have helped me at a certain time. But yeah, so I've gotten better at figuring stuff out from the docs. But every time I'm looking stuff up, like, okay, now I just want to see the health of my cluster. Let's see. Or now I want to pretty print the index or whatever it is. So I've been figuring it out over time, but it has been a journey. And there was a time where one of the add-ons, we used one of them. I think it was just called Elastic or Elasticsearch. And we just had so many issues with it. And one day our Elasticsearch instance just disappeared. And we tried to get in touch with the support and we were on their like most expensive plan. So we expected decent service. And we got like a response about an hour later or something being like, oh yeah, server running your instance just kind of shut down. We're just going to try and bring it back. And keep in mind, there's like hundreds and hundreds of people trying to use the app and there's just no search. And while we were waiting, Rob said, let's just spin up and let's just figure out a new Elasticsearch service and spin it up. And I just thought, no, I got to set up. I don't want to have to set up another one. But we figured it out and we got there. So yeah, Elasticsearch has been a journey, but it's nice not having it tied directly into our Postgres database. And as I figure out certain things, like it's been super helpful, even just in helping with the Goodreads imports, which are because I've been able to like use our Elasticsearch to handle some of the searches that happen when we're trying to match people's books up and things like that. So I feel like I've still got a lot to learn, but I figured everything I've wanted to do, I've figured it out. But those docs, they're not great, as in they're not accessible.
Yeah, I've run the reindex command and waited from 5 minutes to freaking 3 days. Oh my God. And when you said Kibana, oh my God. I thought I had fully suppressed that memory. And I wrote the Kibana dashboards. I did that. Oh my God. So happy that's behind me.
I feel like my interview is bringing up like a lot of trauma for you.
Hold on. Before you feel that way, I just want to clarify. Andrew's easily triggered. Every episode, Andrew's like, I'm triggered by X. So
Elasticsearch and Heroku graphs trigger everyone.
What about Kafka?
I don't want to talk about Kafka.
Again, being a solo dev, if I'm working, something's done, I'm moving on to the next thing, I'm having my life outside of StoryGraph stuff. And so it's actually quite nice. I don't often have time where I get to talk with other devs about the same issue. So it's quite nice, actually. I'm enjoying it. I hope Andrew's enjoying it, really.
I am enjoying it. It's like, oh my God, she did it too? I'm like, oh, I feel the same way. But I'm like, I'm not alone either. It's like someone else had this problem.
Yes.
Oh, feels good. I found a new book I want to read on StoryGraph already.
Oh, fun. What's the book?
I was adding a book that I read recently or started reading called How to Take Smart Notes. And when I typed in how to take smart notes in this awesome Elasticsearch input, I got the book that I wanted as the top result. I'm like, perfect. Put that into my currently reading list. And then I look down because I'm like, oh, what else is on here? And I see a developer that I know and an application that I love. And it's How to Take Smart Notes in Obsidian by Joshua Duffney. And I'm like,
Obsidian would come up today.
I want to read that. Stick that in my want to read queue. I'm officially a StoryGraph user now.
Yay! I'm so happy. I love that. And also you can look at similar books to those books and see what else comes out. And in your reading preferences survey, you can put exactly the type of topics and themes. So you can put Obsidian in there, see what else comes out, note taking. So yeah, the main focus is discovery. one of the things that we do is we don't focus on star ratings. They're there, but we don't use them in terms of recommendations. And we also don't focus on like popularity of a book or outside of star ratings, how well known it is, or there's nothing like that, or even publication date. We have filter menus where you can filter, but we're like, tell us what mood you're in. Tell us what topics you like to read about, and we'll show you what's out there. And then you can decide if you want to discount books because of a certain rating, or if some people only like to read newer releases. Some people only like to read older books. So you can then fine tune the results and make your selection. And so it's always great hearing anecdotes of people who are going to look for a certain book, but then they discover something else because of the way the app is set up.
I'll give you some more. I clicked see similar and I'm scrolling through this list. I'm like, oh, well, I never even thought about reading how to like study better. Like, that's interesting. And I'm scrolling down and I'm seeing books that I have read in the past and really enjoyed, but haven't added yet. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did like that book and it was similar. And that is why I eventually found it. I'm like, this is so cool. I'm about to have a blast this weekend.
Yay. Are you a dark mode person?
Yes.
Okay, because this is what has been the bane of my life for the last week. I'm currently implementing dark mode, which is our most requested feature ever on our roadmap in the history of the product. And everyone's so excited. And that's what I've been working on. I just severely underestimated how long it was going to take to get it right. And so that's what I'm in the middle of. So part of the exasperation you heard earlier when I was talking about the design was, I also just want to be done with this dark mode. And I hope everyone likes the dark mode scheme because I'm not a typical dark mode user. But so far, people who've seen it say it looks good. I hope that you like it if you're still using the app in a few days when it comes out.
I will. I love that dark mode. I finally found a color palette that works for both dark and light with the same color names. I did some design. Like, I have some design background. I've taken years of art history. I cannot design for crap. I desperately try. This is the first color scale I've ever been like, suddenly I don't have to ask myself, is it this shade or this shade? There's always an answer. Each color is for a specific thing. It's called Radix Colors. I'll show you later and I'll put a link in the show notes. It's amazing.
Wait, you found this or you designed this?
I found it. I did not design it.
I was like, wow, how did you get there? I want to know. And why didn't you tell me about this a week ago?
I think math had to have gone into this. Someone talented did this, not me.
You're talented.
Not in the color palette design.
Okay.
I don't know. I like the color of the shirt you're wearing today.
I do too.
Thank you.
It really adds to all the color around you, which is just
I bought it.
A green plant.
Andrea told me that I only wear black shirts. And one day I was like, oh yeah, I got to stop at the store afterwards. And she's like, oh, you going to buy another black shirt? And ever since then, I'm like, okay, I can't buy the black shirt. What else colors they have? Don't buy black. Don't buy black. That's all I own, apparently.
I was going to say all I have is black shirts, but I'm wearing a green shirt. So we bought this together, Andrew, at Walmart in Winston, Missouri.
A lovely day.
This is something that we didn't talk about beforehand, but you've done a lot of public speaking and you also have like resources for people, like a Speakerline, I believe is your project, right? And if it's cool, I would actually love to maybe just talk about it for a little bit, because something I've kind of noticed the last few years is that like whenever you go to like Ruby or Rails CFP, like they show you how many people are submitting. And it seems like the numbers are kind of like getting lower each year. And I'm sure, yes, some people have moved on from Ruby. I do wonder if there's a lot of new people coming into Ruby though, who maybe are just like scared to submit or like don't think I could do that. And I wonder if there's a lot of like voices we're not hearing from. And so I was wondering if maybe you wouldn't mind just kind of talking about how you got into public speaking and any advice you might have for those who think, oh, that's not for me.
I used to be at high school. I was fine one-on-one, fine in groups of friends when you're just kind of messing around. But when it came to presenting or sharing my opinion, so I was in book clubs. I've always been in book clubs, essentially. I found myself being really nervous. I was really scared to share my opinion, even amongst friends. I had to do school assemblies. Do you have that term? Do you call it school assemblies where everyone gathers in the morning and then, yeah. And I would just be nervous. And I knew the day I had to do something about it was a few people were selected to read the first paragraph of one of your favorite books. I was so nervous. I thought that people could hear my heart beating through the mic. And I said to myself, this is ridiculous. These are not even your own words. They're someone else's words. So what are you nervous about? You're just reading a book. And so I 16, I think was join the debate club because I thought that would be a great way to, because debate club, you're told what side you're arguing and you just have to argue it. So I joined debating so that I would get over my nervousness of public speaking, essentially. That helped. And I did that all through uni. So that's in general how I got over kind of just speaking in public. And then when I just started Pivotal, I remember it was actually people going to Andy Kroll's Brighton Ruby. I think it was the first ever one. And I was like, that seems fun. I want to go. But Pivotal's policy said you had to be at the company for a year or a year and a half, and then you got $2,000 a year. So I was in the London office of Pivotal, but they essentially copied and pasted the policy documents from the San Francisco office. So it was all, everything was in dollars. It said you get $2,000 after you've been at the company for like a year and a half. But if you're invited to speak at this pre-approved list of conferences, you can do that whenever. So I said, time to get into public conference speaking, tech conference speaking, so that I can go to these places. So that was like in my mind, but then similar to how I had with my whole entrepreneurship journey, I didn't know what to talk about. I just never wanted to do I'm a junior in tech. I felt like I saw a lot of those. I didn't want to do that. And then I felt like I didn't know enough about any other topic because I was still junior that a room of developers wanted to hear about. And so I remember I thought, okay, what do I know a lot about that maybe a lot of people in tech don't know about? And I thought economics. And then I thought of my favorite branch of it, which was game theory. And I was working on Cloud Foundry, which was a Pivotal's platform as a service. And there was a lot of distributed systems. So I thought, game theory, distributed systems, the computers are basically playing games and trying to interact and distribute the work. So I developed my first talk, which is playing games in the cloud. And I gave it at a Pivotal evening. It was a Cloud Foundry meetup in the evening. And my boss at the time, JB, came over and said, you should submit that to conferences. That would be good. And I kind of thought, oh, cool. It was like a lightning talk. And then he said, you could make that a full talk. So I thought, cool. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure what would be a great audience for it. And then one evening he said, oh, you should come and meet my friend. She knows about like conference speaking and stuff. So I went and met this woman. I didn't know anything about her. She said, JB says you've got this talk. And I explained what it was about. And she listened to me and she was like, that sounds great. You should submit that to Rails Conf. And I remember thinking, I don't know whether this lady was listening to me. My talk is about game theory and distributed systems. It's nothing to do with Rails. So I kind of was just like, okay, fine, whatever. And then JB asked JB afterwards, oh, what was the name of your friend? And it was Sarah May. And I had no clue. And I Googled and I saw that, oh, so she's on the board of Ruby Central. And obviously I would later find out that she definitely knew what she was talking about. But at the time, I didn't know who she was. And so I thought, well, if she's on the board of the committee running this conference and she heard my idea and thought it would be good, I guess it's good. So I put together a proposal and submitted the proposal and it got accepted. And so my first conference thing was Rails Conf in Atlanta in 2015. And then after that, I was invited to be in the committee for RubyConf, which was in San Antonio. And it was through that experience of doing my first talk submission. And I gave that talk that year at Brighton Ruby too, which was great. It was my first friend. It was amazing. And at GoRuco that year. And through being on committee that I realized that, wow, I was really lucky to have someone, JB actually, who looked through my proposal and he was able to like edit it and make it tight. So I was looking through a whole range of quality of proposals. And I was like, wow, like I'm really lucky I had someone who could help me, who understood the talk I was trying to give and could help me get it to where it needed to be. And so, yeah, I just realized that there was a whole range of quality resources and that if you know the right people, a lot of people, they probably had a good talk, but the proposal wasn't great. And then I also learned through this experience that you can have a really great proposal, but then the talk doesn't come together. And that's always my thing because my strategy with talks, people have different strategies, but over the years, my thing is I have one main talk idea at a time. I submit conferences. I don't write the talk until I get an acceptance conference. And I know some people do it differently. Some people might make the talk and then submit it. But I personally, because I put so much time in my talks, it's not worth it for me. I remember there was one time at Pivotal where I had pitched someone my new talk idea and they were like, you should do it for like the lunchtime meetup. And I remember thinking, unless it gets accepted at a conference, I'm not doing the lunchtime meetup. No way. And so essentially at some point over the years, the reason why I started Speakerline is because I realized that there were a lot of people out there that wanted to give talks, but they just didn't know how to approach it essentially because they didn't have people around them, a network. Like how lucky I had a great person who encouraged me to say, this would be good, introduce me to someone like Sarah May, help me proposal. Like that's what got me started. And I just thought, well, I would love to show my proposal to people. and also show that just because you get rejected from a conference, it doesn't mean that your talk proposal wasn't good. Sometimes there's just a limited number of spaces. And so the whole thing behind Speakerline was, let's not only get the proposals out there so you can see that there's a variety of proposals, but also see that the same proposal that got accepted to keynote at X conference got rejected from another conference. So don't take that rejection as this is not a good talk. And there's so much more that I wanted to do with Speakerline, but I just, especially with StoryGraph, I haven't been able to work on it. It is open source. And now and again, I'll post something about, I want contributors, but I haven't really pushed it that much. But I think there's a lot more that can be done with it. And I think it's what you said, Jason. There are a lot of people who want to speak, but think that they can't or it's not for them. And I mean, I literally used to struggle reading in front of people. And I wish I could do more, really. And maybe at some point I can do more in terms of showing people that if you want to speak, then you can. But also, you don't have to speak. I've heard stories from some people who, their boss or whatever tries to make it seem like to progress, you also need to do like extracurricular. You should speak and do screencasts or blog posts and stuff. And it's like, no, you shouldn't ever be forced to do it. And also, one of the reasons why I get very stressed about my talks is I think it's a big deal to have people sit and listen to you for 20, 30 minutes. I really try not to make my talks longer than half an hour. The Rails SaaS one was an exception. And so hearing feedback like Andrew's at the beginning where he said, forced to sit in this room and like hear a talk, that is something I'm very sensitive to. I definitely feel like if you have something that you want to talk about, then definitely go for it and you can do it. But there's no point like speaking for speaking's sake as well. And so whenever I do my talk, the worst thing is if people are in the room thinking, why am I at this talk? I feel like it has to either be entertaining or you learn something, and ideally both.
Yeah. And I had a real fear of public speaking. I took public speaking online in college. I had to record myself in front of a camera and put it on YouTube because I didn't want to actually like go to class and have to speak in front of other people. So having the courage to actually like give a talk was like pretty life-changing. I'm sure it's helped me professionally, but even just being able to be like, I can do this. And at the same time, like my first talks were trash. I thought they were really good, but then like the first talk I ever gave was on YouTube and you could still see the thumbs down votes. And that was hard, but with practice and like trying to nail the proposal, I like your method. If you really sum up how much a good talk takes to make, it could be 80 hours. It's a lot of work. When you said like, yeah, I don't really want to do all that work for a lunch and learn. Like, yeah, no, I don't either. So I like the idea of like, if you could really put that effort to nailing the proposal, writing it out and then trimming it down, keeping it just to the point and a good sales pitch. Yeah, that's really good.
A couple of things on that. One is the way I think about how I approach conference speaking. It's similar to product building. I see the proposal as, hey, do you want this? This is what I'm selling. And so when I see people writing talks before it's been accepted anywhere, a lunch and learn might be fine. I'm not just because I said I wasn't going to do it for a lunch and learn. That's fine. Whatever event you want to speak at. But I say have the idea or the proposal accepted first, because otherwise you might end up building a talk, producing a talk that nobody wants. So that's why I go through that approach, and it just saves you time. And then the other thing that I found through my speaking is over the years, I have figured out there are many different aspects to it. There's writing the proposal, there's writing the talk, there's putting together your slide deck, there's delivering your talk. And like over the years, I have different people that I go to help me on each part. I learned very early on that, oh, okay, you are great for helping me get my proposal tight. But when I present the talk to you, you're like, it's great pretty much all the time. And the same talk, I'm going to go give it to my other friend. And he or she's going to say, this whole central thing didn't make sense to me. And so I've learned, oh, I go to you for this. And it's different. Like I would bring in, I remember when I did my first, I have these series of, I say series, I've got two, but in my mind, I'm like, it's a series, it's a trilogy of Ruby Private Investigator talk. And when I did the first one, I was in the Pivotal office at the time. I was working with Theo, but we had space in the Pivotal office. And I organized a lunchtime talk and I invited developers, designer, and a product person. And I remember briefing people beforehand. I said, hey, devs, make sure this code makes sense. Like, I don't want to embarrass myself. And people are like, they can't focus on the funny mystery because they're like, but fundamentally, this code doesn't work. And I said to my designer friend, I was like, can you just look at the slides, make sure they look good? And I said to my product friend, don't worry if you don't follow the tech, but can you check that the narrative arc of this makes sense? So I gave people different things. even with the one I did recently, I did another one recently, and I messaged like my Ruby friends to check like the tech side, just the tech. And so that's another thing that you learn over time as well. Like different friends and different people are good for different bits of feedback. And so you shouldn't feel compelled to just say, oh, this person's going to help me. Don't be shy to say, see, that's okay. I don't need to do a talk one through with you. I'm going to do it with this person and all that kind of stuff.
That's another very good point. My talks got better when I started bringing other people in. I often now, before I go give a talk, will like at work be like, hey, anybody want to like hang out for 45 minutes? And I get really good feedback. Andrew was with me at the last one. And even though he's coming to the conference and is going to hear the talk, he's like, oh no, like this is the feedback I have. And it's usually pretty spot on. The other thing that came to my mind, the first time I talked at Rails Conf was 2017. And Olivier, we met on that trip and he came to my talk and sat there and just nodded the whole time. Having a friend come or someone just to come and like show you that they're engaged, whether they mean it or not really, but just having someone who's engaged, like Andrew's really good at that. Whenever I go to a talk like now and Andrew's there, like he sits front row now. He's my nod god. Yeah. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think you're a great speaker and I think it's cool that you have like Speakerline. And so I thought it'd be cool to kind of share for people out there to kind of learn from. So I appreciate that.
I do want to say, first off, Sarah May has one of the best articles I've ever read on writing a conference proposal called What Your Conference Proposal is Missing. We will link that in the show notes. If you're writing a conference proposal, highly recommend. Also, when I went to Rails SaaS, I loved your talk. I did not know you started Speakerline. Then at some point I found out you started Speakerline and then totally forgot until Jason said it. And you have been my savior.
Really?
I always wanted to speak because like I don't have stage fright. I am not the greatest writer because I feel like my thing is like live. I am good live. I'm not good when I have to sit there and think. And I spent hours and hours researching conference proposals, trying to find examples, this and that. And then suddenly, I don't know how I found it, but this magical website with conference proposals for the exact type of conferences I was trying to apply to was just there. I have never had a conference proposal get accepted. I've put every CFP I've ever written on that site. And I tell people, every year I tell people like, yeah, check out Speakerline. You got it. Like, it's awesome. Like it's got blah, blah, blah. I love that website so much. It has helped me every year. Every year I write a CFP, I go look at it and I read through and I'm like, okay, this is what I did last year. And like, I really like how this person did this and highly recommend if you're thinking about writing a CFP.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for building that.
Well, if there's some open issues, if you want to have a look and help me make it better.
I might be willing to do that.
Andrew, I have one question for you before we wrap up. You've got 2 Gatorade bottles. I've seen you reach for the left one twice, but always go to the right one. What do we got going on here?
This one's empty. Okay. This one's half full. I forgot when I came in originally, I accidentally grabbed the empty one and I had to come back out and get the full one. So that's why it's on my desk and empty.
Okay.
You can put it on the floor. So then you don't get, there you go.
I didn't even realize I was reaching for it until you said that.
Yeah, I'm also impressed you have 2 Gatorade bottles. I never not learn something new about you when we hang out.
That's amazing.
I'm not sure if I did yet or not either, but there's so much depth to you. And I think we could start a whole nother podcast where we just dig into it.
Julie said something very similar to me today about that. And I was like, this feels really good, but I don't know how to take this because...
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you how I mean it either. I want to leave you in suspense for the podcast.
I'll go. Well, Nadia, you got 2 really ADHD people to sit there for that entire talk paying attention, which sometimes sitting in a seat for 10 to 20 minutes is actually painful. And I could have sat there and kept listening for hours.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It was so much fun. The time flew by.
I had a lot of fun.
Same. I'm really appreciative. You joining us in just chatting Ruby and all the random side roads we take. For those listening, where can they find you online?
So they can find StoryGraph online. We're on Twitter at the StoryGraph, Instagram at _StoryGraph, Mastodon. We've got bookstodon.thestorygraph.com and we're the StoryGraph on there. We're on TikTok as the StoryGraph. We're on all the platforms. And then me personally, I am on Twitter, Odunayo, Instagram, which is more my dancing, but you can check out my dancing too. And Mastodon as well, Odunayo. It's the same everywhere.
Awesome. We didn't even get into dancing. So we'll have a whole nother episode of that. I actually have one more question. So I know it's called the StoryGraph. Do you refer to it as StoryGraph? Is the important? This is important to me to know.
Okay, this is what happened. You know the creative writing publication I ran at uni? It was called The StoryGraph because it was like an online newspaper, and we have like The Times, the Telegraph, those kind of papers. And so it was called that, and that was the domain I had. When I started this side project, it was called Read Lists because it was it was actually a companion app to Goodreads. And then when it started becoming bigger, Read Lists didn't fit anymore. And I thought, why don't I use this StoryGraph name? The domain was The StoryGraph, and storygraph.com was already taken. So that's why I kind of stuck with it. And then as we've grown, people have been like, why is there there? But StoryGraph is like taken on all other platforms. And so we kind of stuck with it. I interchange depending on, but I definitely say StoryGraph more than I used to.
It's a cool name. My natural thing was to always just go StoryGraph. Yeah. And I was like, I need to say the. And so
you can say StoryGraph. I sometimes say it. We sometimes write it that way. We've definitely had people annoyed about the. And I'm like, it's something I started in 2012 at university.
It's cool you got to reuse the domain. I have 91 domains that just expire every year.
Well, the thing is, when I shut down the publication, I had a corporate entity because StoryGraph had got a little bit of grant money from a scheme. And so I thought, let me start up a company. This was me being like, I'm an entrepreneur, any excuse to start a company. So when I was shutting down or ceasing operations with the e-publication, my mom said, don't shut down the company. I think the name's good. I feel like you're going to use it for something. It's such a good name. You can use it for something else. And so I was like, okay, sure, why not?
That's amazing. That is a heck of a story.
Especially because stats is a key part of our product. So StoryGraph, it just fits so well.
That's so awesome. Well, again, thank you for joining us. And will we see you at Rails or RubyConf this year?
Maybe. I'm not sure yet, but I look forward to the next time that we can all hang out in person.
I know, it'll be great. Well, thanks again. And Chris, Andrew, I will catch you on the flippity flop.
Bye.
Bye.